On my mother's birthday I surprised her with a gift I thought would make her smile. But instead she broke down crying and admitted she wasn't my real mother at all. And suddenly every childhood memory had felt like someone else's, not mine. I was the golden child, the one who called every Sunday, remembered every birthday, showed to every family dinner with flowers and a smile. At 29 I had it all figured out: successful marketing career, beautiful fiancée Sarah, wedding planned for next spring. I was that guy who made other people's boyfriends look bad because I actually gave about the little things. Or so I thought, until I met Jessica at that work conference in Miami. It started innocent enough. She was funny, brilliant, had this way of laughing at my jokes that made me feel like the most interesting man alive. Sarah had been distant lately, stressed about wedding planning, snapping at me over stuff like which napkin color to choose. Jessica listened. Jessica appreciated me. Jessica made me feel seen in a way I'd forgotten was possible. The night before the conference ended, we were at the hotel bar. Too many drinks, too much validation, too much of her hand on my arm when she laughed. When she suggested we continue the conversation in her room, I knew exactly what I was choosing. I told it was just one night, just once. Sarah would never know. I followed her upstairs like a man walking to his own, except I was too on attention to realize I was holding the. There was nothing special. Awkward hotel room fumbling that lasted maybe 10 minutes, but the betrayal, that seeped into everything the moment I crossed that threshold. When I flew home the next day, Sarah picked me at the airport with my favorite coffee, and that smile that used to make my chest tight with love. Instead, I felt nothing but the hollow of what I'd thrown away for a stranger's validation. I convinced I could live with it. Lock it away, be a better boyfriend, marry Sarah, and never think about Miami again. For 3 months I almost believed my own lie. I bought Sarah a bigger ring, planned romantic weekend getaways, became the most attentive fiancé in the world. Guilt makes generous in all the wrong ways. But guilt also makes careless. Mom's 65th birthday was coming. I'd spent weeks planning the perfect surprise, a custom photo album filled with decades of family memories. Pictures of me as a baby, childhood vacations, graduations, holidays. I worked with Sarah to gather photos from everyone, even tracked down pictures from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. It was going to be the gift that made her cry happy tears, the kind of thing she'd treasure forever. The day of her party I was feeling good. Proud even. Here I was, the son who remembered every important moment, who put thought and love into every gesture. I'd even managed to push Miami into a dark corner of my mind where it couldn't touch this perfect moment. I handed her the beautifully wrapped album in front of 20 family members, all gathered in her living room. She opened it with that anticipatory smile, the one that said she already knew she was about to be overwhelmed by her thoughtful son's gesture. She flipped through the first few pages, commenting on how cute I was as a baby, laughing at a particularly ridiculous Halloween costume from when I was 7. Everyone was crowding around, pointing at their favorites, sharing memories. It was perfect. Then she turned to a page near the back and her face changed. The smile died. Her hand trembled against the page. She stared at a photo I thought was sweet, me at maybe 4 years old, sitting on Santa's lap at the mall, grinning with missing front teeth. Where did get this? Her voice was barely a whisper. Aunt leaned assent. I asked everyone for their favorite old photos of me. Mom, what's wrong? She looked at me with eyes full of something I'd never seen before. Terror, grief, a pain so deep it seemed to go back decades. This isn't. The room went silent. Even the kids stopped playing. What do you mean it isn't me? Of course it's me. She closed the album with shaking hands and stood. For a moment I thought she might faint. Dad moved toward her, but she held a hand to stop him. Everyone needs to leave. Now, please. The confusion in the room was thick enough to. Cousins looked at each other with raised eyebrows. Grandma started to protest, but something in Mom's voice made everyone move toward their coats without argument. Within 10 minutes, the house was empty except for me, Mom, Dad, and Sarah. Mom sat back down heavily, like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. She held the album against her chest like it might fly away. That picture is of my son. My real son. The one I gave birth to, the one I lost. The words hit me like physical blows. What are talking about? Dad's face had gone gray. He sat down beside her, reaching for her hand. We never meant for to find out like this, he said. Find out what? What is going on? Mom looked at me with tears streaming down her face. We're adopted, sweetie. We adopted when we're 6 months old. But look so much like him now that sometimes I forget. Sometimes I let pretend we're always ours. The room tilted. Everything I thought I knew about shifted like sand. Who was he? The baby in the pickle son. Our biological son. He died when he was 4. Leukemia. She pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back sobs. We tried for years after that to have another baby. We couldn't. So we adopted and were perfect, and saved us, and I love exactly the same as I loved him. But seeing this picture. She couldn't finish. She just held that album and cried like her heart was breaking all over again. I stood there in my parents' living room, the same living room where I'd opened Christmas presents and brought home report cards and introduced them to Sarah, and felt like I was looking at strangers. Everything felt, every memory, every story they'd told me about my childhood, every time they said I had Dad's eyes or Mom's stubbornness. Why didn't tell me? My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from someone else. We were going to, Dad said. When we're older. But we're so happy, and it never seemed like the right time, and then years passed, and it got harder to bring. Sarah reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I couldn't stand to be touched right then. I couldn't stand to have anyone look at me with pity. What was his name? Real son. Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. Our real son. Know what I mean? But she was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Finally she whispered, David. His name was David. David. My parents had a son named David who died, and then they got me. A replacement. A consolation prize. A living band-aid over a wound that never healed. I left without saying goodbye. Sarah followed me to the car, trying to talk, trying to make sense of what just happened. But I couldn't hear her over the sound of my entire rewriting itself in my head. Driving home, all I could think about was Jessica, the woman I'd betrayed Sarah for, betrayed my relationship for, betrayed the man I thought I was for. Who was I really? If my whole was built on a lie, if even my name might not be real, then what did any of it matter? I'd spent 3 months drowning in guilt over one night with a stranger, and now I found out I'd been living someone else's all along. That night while Sarah slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if David would have been a better son. If David would have made better choices. If David would have deserved the love I'd been given by accident. I never should have made that photo album. Some gifts are too dangerous to give. The days after Mom's birthday party passed like a fever dream. I called in sick to work and spent hours googling my own adoption, trying to find records, trying to piece together who I really was. Sarah tiptoed around me like I was made of glass, bringing me coffee and asking gentle questions I couldn't answer cause I didn't know anything anymore. Every childhood memory felt contaminated. That time Dad taught me to ride a bike. He probably taught David first. The family vacation to Disney World when I was 8. They probably planned to take David there. Even my baby photos felt like lies, some other baby's milestones being passed off as mine. I found studying my face in the mirror, looking for traces of strangers. Mom always said I had Dad's nose, but now I knew it was just coincidence. Genetics from people I'd never met, carrying traits from a bloodline I knew nothing about. The worst part was how everyone kept trying to comfort me. Or still Sarah would say, rubbing my back while I sat motionless on the couch. This doesn't change anything about who you are. But it changed everything. It changed the story I told about belonging, about being wanted, about family meaning something deeper than legal paperwork. Mom called every day I didn't answer. She left voicemails that started confident and ended in tears. Sweetie, please call me back, we need to talk about this. Or still my son, will always be my son. But I could hear it in her voice now, that slight hesitation, that catch that said she was thinking about David while she talked to me. The photo album sat on my kitchen counter like evidence of a crime. I'd flip through it sometimes studying the pictures with new eyes. There I was at 5, missing my 2 front teeth. But was that even me? Or was it some other kid's smile they'd claimed as mine? A week after the birthday disaster, I finally went back to work. I thought focusing on something normal might help, might give me a few hours where I could pretend to be the person everyone thought I was. That's when I saw the email from Jessica. Hey stranger, I'm gonna be in city next week for another conference. Want to grab drinks and catch? I stared at that message for 20 minutes. Sarah was planning our wedding. My parents were grieving the revelation they'd never wanted to make. My entire identity was in freefall. And here was Jessica, offering me an escape from all of it. I told I was just gonna meet her for one drink. Just to talk to someone who didn't know about the adoption, who still saw me as the confident guy from Miami. Someone who didn't look at me with worry or pity or the crushing weight of family expectations. We met at a hotel bar downtown. She looked exactly like I remembered, sharp suit, easy smile, the kind of woman who never seemed to doubt herself about anything. Looked terrible, she said, and somehow it was exactly what I needed to hear. Not the careful concern everyone else was showing me, just brutal honesty. Thanks, I feel terrible. We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything: the birthday party, the photo album, finding out my entire childhood was built around a dead boy's shadow. She listened without trying to fix it or minimize it or tell me it didn't matter. That's heavy, she said when I finished. No wonder look like haven't slept in a week. I haven't. She signaled for another round. So what are going to do about it? What do mean? I mean, are going to spend the rest of wondering who would have been, or are going to decide who want to be now. It sounded so simple when she said it, like I could just choose to start over, choose to be someone new, someone who wasn't living in a dead boy's place. When she suggested we go to her room, I didn't hesitate like I had in Miami. I followed her to the elevator, let her push the button for the 14th floor, stood beside her in silence as we rose above the city where Sarah was probably planning our seating chart. This time, the lasted longer. This time I paid attention to every detail. The way she said my name, the way she moved, the way she made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. For 2 hours, I forgot about David. I forgot about the adoption. I forgot about the weight of being someone's replacement child. I was just me, whoever that was. Walking to my car afterward, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Guilty, yes, but also free. If my whole was a construction anyway, if everything I thought I knew about was wrong, then what did it matter if I tore it down and built something new? I told Sarah I'd been at a work dinner. She believed me because she had no reason not to. I was the reliable guy, the one who called when he'd be late, the one who brought her flowers for no reason. The one who'd never given her cause to doubt. Over the next month I met Jessica 3 more times. Always at hotels. Always in the afternoon when Sarah thought I was in meetings. Each time it got easier to lie, easier to compartmentalize, easier to tell this was just a temporary escape while I figured out my real. Jessica never asked about Sarah. She never pushed for more than I was offering. She was like a parallel universe where I could be someone uncomplicated, someone whose biggest worry was which restaurant to try for lunch. But parallel universes have a way of colliding. I was getting sloppy, staying out later, taking longer lunch breaks, buying new clothes I claimed I'd had for months. Sarah noticed, of course she noticed. She just didn't know what she was noticing. Are okay? She asked one night as we were getting ready for bed. Seemed different lately. Distant. I was brushing my teeth, watching her in the bathroom mirror. She looked worried, vulnerable in her old college t-shirt with her hair in a messy bun. The woman who'd agreed to marry me, who'd spent hours on wedding planning websites while I was texting another woman. I'm fine, I said around the toothbrush, just processing everything with the adoption stuff. It was a perfect excuse. It explained away any weird behavior, any emotional distance, any changes she picked on. And the worst part was it wasn't entirely a lie. I was processing the adoption stuff. I was just processing it by making choices that would destroy everything we'd built together. That night, she curled against me in bed like she always did, her hand on my chest, her breathing slow and trusting. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about how easy it would be to keep living this double. Keep seeing Jessica when she was in town. Keep planning a wedding with Sarah. Keep pretending I was still the man either of them thought I was. I almost convinced it could work. Then Sarah found the hotel receipt. It fell out of my jacket pocket while she was taking clothes to the dry cleaner. Such a careless mistake. I'd forgotten it was even there. She didn't say anything at first. Just put it on the kitchen counter next to my keys, like she was giving me a chance to explain, like she was hoping there was innocent reason her fiancé had been at a downtown hotel on a Tuesday afternoon. When I saw it there, my stomach dropped to my feet. So, she said, walking into the kitchen with her arms crossed. The Marriott downtown. Tuesday. Want to tell me about client meeting? I could have lied. Could have made some story about meeting a client there, about using their business center, about anything other than the truth. She would have believed me because she loved me, because she trusted me, because I was the guy who'd ever given her a reason not to. Instead, I looked at her face and hopeful and scared all at once, and I broke. I'm having an affair. The words hung in the air between us like a physical thing. I watched her face change, watched hope in real time, watched the woman who'd planned to spend her with me realize she didn't know me at all. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just nodded, like part of her had been expecting this. How long? For months. On and off, the same person from Miami. I'd never told her about Miami. The fact that she knew meant she'd been putting pieces together, had been watching me lie to her face for months while building a case in her head. Yes. She picked the hotel receipt and looked at it again, like she was memorizing the details. I need to leave, she said quietly. Tonight, pack a bag and go somewhere else, and we'll figure out the rest later. I wanted to argue, to explain, to tell her about the adoption and how it had messed with my head and made me do things. But looking at her face, I realized none of that mattered. I'd made my choices. I'd chosen Jessica over Sarah, chosen temporary escape over permanent love, chosen to be the kind of man who ruins everything good in his. I packed a bag while she sat on the couch staring at nothing. When I was done, I stood in our doorway, the doorway to the apartment we'd shared for 2 years, where we'd planned our wedding and talked about kids and built it together. Sarah, I don't. Her voice was steady, but I could see the tears starting. Just don't. Whatever about to say, it won't change anything. Chose her over me, over us, over everything we were going to be. So just go. I left my key on the table and walked out of the I'd spent 5 years building. Standing in the hallway with my hastily packed bag, I realized I had nowhere to go. I couldn't go to my parents' house. I was still avoiding them after the adoption revelation. I couldn't go to friends because I'd have to explain why Sarah had kicked me out. And I wasn't ready to watch their faces change when they learned what kind of person I really was. I ended at a hotel. Not the one where Jessica and I had been meeting. I couldn't face that level of pathetic irony. A different one, with clean sheets that smelled like industrial detergent and a view of the parking lot. I sat on the edge of the bed and called the one person who might understand. Jessica, it's me. Sarah found out, can we talk? But when I told her what happened, her response wasn't what I expected. That's rough, she said. But honestly, this was always going to end badly. I told from the beginning that I'm not looking for anything serious. I thought understood that. I do understand that. I need to talk to someone who gets it. I'm actually flying back to Seattle tonight, and I think it's better if we don't see each other anymore. I've got a lot to figure out, and I don't want to be part of that mess. She hung before I could respond. I sat in that sterile hotel room and realized I'd lost everything. Sarah, who'd loved me unconditionally. Jessica, who'd never loved me at all. My parents, who I couldn't face. My sense of who I was, which had been built on lies anyway. The adoption had knocked my world off its axis, but I was the one who'd chosen to let it spin completely out of control. I was the one who'd decided that finding out I was adopted meant nothing else mattered. I was the one who'd burned down for a woman who saw me as a convenient distraction. I was the one who'd proven that maybe I wasn't worthy of the love my parents had given me, even if it came after loss and heartbreak and the ghost of another child. Maybe David would have made better choices. Maybe David would have deserved the family that raised me. Maybe they got the wrong son after all. I lived in hotels for 3 weeks while I looked for an apartment. Each morning, I'd wake disoriented, forgetting for a few blissful seconds that my head imploded. Then reality would crash back, the adoption, the affair, Sarah's face when I told her the truth, the sound of the door closing on everything I'd built. The apartment I finally found was a studio in a complex full of divorced dads and recent college graduates. It came furnished with a Murphy bed and a kitchen that was basically a hot plate next to a mini fridge. The previous tenant had left in a dying plant and a coffee mug that said, "World's Greatest Dad." I the mug away but kept the plant, though I had no idea how to keep it alive. Sarah handled the dissolution of our with devastating efficiency. She returned my ring by mail with a note that said simply, "Please don't contact me." She kept the apartment, the furniture, the friends, the we'd built. I got my clothes, my laptop, and a box of things she decided were mine. Mostly gifts from my parents and books I'd claimed to like but never actually read. The wedding was supposed to be in 6 weeks. She called the venues, canceled the vendors, returned the dress. Her sister posted on Facebook that the wedding was off, due to circumstances beyond our control. Which was the kindest possible way to say future brother-in-law turned out to be a cheating piece of. I finally called Mom 3 weeks after moving into the studio. "Honey," she said, and I could hear her crying immediately. "I've been so worried." Sarah said too broke, but she wouldn't tell me why. I sat on the floor of my empty apartment, I hadn't bought a couch yet, and tried to figure out how to explain. How to tell Mother, who's already grieving one son, that the replacement son she raised turned out to be exactly kind of man she taught me never to become. I had an affair months over. Is silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "Oh, sweetie," not anger, not disappointment. Just grief, like she was mourning another loss, another son who'd died in a different way. "I don't know who I am anymore," I told her. Finding out about the adoption, everything felt like I was living someone else's. Was never. David was our son, and our son. Different doesn't mean less real. But I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. The weight of having to comfort another child through a crisis while she was still processing her own pain from that birthday revelation. "I think I need some time to figure things out," I said. "How much time?" "I don't, maybe a lot." After we hung, I realized I just told my parents I was essentially them off too. First Sarah, now them. I was systematically dismantling every relationship that had ever mattered. Like I was conducting some kind of experiment in human isolation. Work became my only constant. I into projects, stayed late, volunteered for every assignment that came. My colleagues probably thought I was angling for a promotion, but really I was just trying to fill the hours between waking and going to sleep with something that didn't involve thinking about what I'd destroyed. That's how I was working late one Thursday night when I got the call. As this David Martinez. For a second I was confused. No one called me David except, wait, this is him. My name is Rebecca Chen. I'm a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. Or listed as the emergency contact for Patricia Martinez. Mom was in the hospital. What happened? Is she okay? She's stable now, but she had a heart earlier this evening. Father is here with her, but he asked us to call. I was in my car before the nurse finished talking, driving through the city at 11 p.m. toward the hospital where I'd been born. Or where I'd been brought after I was born somewhere else to someone else. Even in crisis, the adoption followed me like a shadow. Dad was in the waiting room looking older than I'd ever seen him. His hair had gone completely gray since the birthday party, and he'd lost weight. When he saw me he stood slowly like his joints. She's sleeping now, he said. They said the next 24 hours are critical. We sat in those uncomfortable plastic chairs under fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly. I kept thinking about the last conversation I'd had with her, how tired she'd sounded, how I'd basically told her I was abandoning the family. This is my fault. I said, no it's not, she's had heart problems for years. The stress from birthday probably didn't help, but not just the birthday, everything. The affair, breaking with Sarah, pulling away from guys. She's been worried sick about me. Dad was quiet for a long time. Then he said, want to know something about the day we adopted? I wasn't sure I did, but I nodded. We almost didn't go through with it. We'd been to the agency, met with the social workers, filled out all the paperwork. But when they called to say there was a baby available, Mother panicked. She said it felt like we were trying to replace David, and that wasn't fair to her, to his memory. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I told her that David was gone, and this baby needed parents, and maybe saving someone else was how we honored what we'd lost. But she couldn't shake the feeling that we were doing it for the wrong reasons. So what changed mind? We went to see. We're 6 months old, staying with a foster family. The social worker brought out and looked at Mother and smiled. Not the reflexive baby smile, but like recognized something in her, like chose her. He looked at me then, and his eyes were bright with tears. She held for maybe 30 seconds before she turned to me and said, this is our son. Not David's replacement. Our son. From that moment on, were never anything else to us. I felt something in my chest. All these weeks of feeling like a consolation prize, like I'd been living in a dead boy's shadow, and it had never been true. The pain was mine, manufactured out of fear and confusion and the devastating discovery that is more complicated than we want it to be. I'm sorry, I said, for pulling away, for making everything harder. We're scared. People do things when they're scared. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the hospital sounds, the beeping machines, the soft conversations, the footsteps of nurses making their rounds. I thought about all the nights I'd lain in hotel beds wondering who I really was, when the answer was sitting right here in a plastic chair, worn out with worry over a son who'd forgotten how to be one. A doctor came out around 3 a.m. to tell us Mom was stable and asking for us. We went in together, and she looked so small in that hospital bed connected to monitors and IVs. But when she saw me, her face lit with the same smile she'd had when I surprised her with birthday cakes as a kid. There's my boy, she whispered. I took her hand, being careful of the IV line. I'm sorry Mom, for everything. Don't apologize for being human. Just do better next time. She squeezed my hand with what little strength she had. Sarah called yesterday. She wanted to know if we're okay, if we'd heard from. Even after everything I'd done to her, Sarah was still worried about me, still checking with my parents to make sure I wasn't completely self-destructing. The kindness of it was almost unbearable. I really with her. Yes, did. But that doesn't mean her forever. Mom recovered, though it took months. I moved back in with my parents temporarily to help take care of her, sleeping in my childhood bedroom surrounded by participation trophies and high school yearbooks. It felt like going backwards, but it was also the first time in months that I felt useful, necessary, like I belonged somewhere. I tried calling Sarah once, about 6 weeks after Mom's heart. I told I just wanted to thank her for checking on me, but really I was hoping for forgiveness. Hoping she might be willing to try again now that I'd figured out who I was. She answered on the third ring. Sarah, it's me. Oppose. Hi. I wanted to thank for calling my parents when Mom was in the hospital. Didn't have to do that. She's been like a mother to me for 5 years. Of past tense. Had been like a mother. I heard it. How are doing? I asked. I'm good. Really good actually. I'm seeing someone. The words hit like a physical. Of course she was. Sarah was beautiful, kind, smart, funny. She was the kind of woman who wouldn't stay single long. But hearing it, knowing that someone else was getting the love I'd thrown away, was devastating. That's great, I managed. I'm happy for her. I want to be happy, even if it's not with me. She was quiet for so long I thought she might have hung. I hope figure things out, she said finally. I really do. But I can't be part of that process, I know. I just wanted to know that I know how badly I messed. What we had was real, and I destroyed it for something that was never real at all. It was real, she agreed. That's what made it so awful when it ended. After we hung, I sat in my childhood bedroom and cried for the first time since that hotel room 3 months earlier. Not just for Sarah, but for the man I used to be. The man who showed, who remembered birthdays, who made his girlfriend feel cherished. The man who would have been horrified by the person I became. I never saw Jessica again. She was a ghost from a chapter I'd closed the moment I chose temporary escape over permanent love. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about me, about the chaos she'd helped me create, but mostly I tried not to think about her at all. A year later I moved into my own apartment again. A better one this time, with actual furniture and windows that looked out on something other than a parking lot. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a 7-year-old mutt named Charlie who'd been returned twice by families who decided they didn't want him anymore. He seemed to understand something about being discarded, about starting over, about the long slow process of learning to trust again. I still work at the same company. I'm good at my job, reliable, focused. My colleagues probably think I'm boring now. I don't go to happy hours or company parties. I go home to Charlie and we watch Netflix, and I try to be the kind of person who deserves the I'm building. Mom and Dad and I have dinner every Sunday. We don't talk about David much, but his presence isn't a wound anymore. He's just part of our story, the brother I never met who led our parents to me. I keep a photo of him on my bookshelf now, the one from the album that started everything. He's 4 years old with gap teeth and my dad's nose, grinning at the camera like the whole world is wonderful. In some ways he saved me by dying. His loss brought me to a family who loved me, and my betrayal of that love taught me what it was worth. I run into Sarah sometimes. The city isn't that big and we have friends in common. She's married now to a guy who looks like he's never made a selfish decision in his. They seem happy in a way that makes my chest itch with recognition. That could have been us, in some other timeline where I made better choices. She's always polite when we see each other. Ask how my parents are doing, how work is going. But there's a distance there now, a wall built from the wreckage of trust. I put that wall there, brick by brick, lie by lie, choice by choice. I've been in therapy for 8 months now. It's helping slowly. Learning to understand why the adoption sent me into such a tailspin, why I responded to an identity crisis by destroying everything that gave my meaning. Learning to forgive without excusing what I did. My therapist asks me sometimes if I think I would have cheated even without the adoption revelation. If I was always the kind of person who would choose temporary pleasure over lasting love. I don't know. I can't know. I only know what I did, not what I might have done in some other version of events. What I know is this: I was raised by people who loved me unconditionally. I was chosen by a woman who saw past her own grief to give a stranger's child a home. I was loved by someone who planned our entire future together and trusted me with her heart. And I hid all away because I was scared of finding out I wasn't who I thought I was. The cruelest irony is that I was right to be scared. I wasn't who I thought I was. I thought I was the kind of man who kept his promises, who showed when things got hard, who chose love over convenience. I thought I was better than the kind of person who destroys lives for temporary validation. Turns out I was exactly the kind of person who ruins everything good in his. And all it took was one identity crisis to prove it. I am not the son my parents thought they were raising. I am not the man Sarah fell in love with. I am not even the man I used to see in the mirror. I am the ghost haunting my own and some mistakes never stop paying for.